You talked about this for femininities. Can we also not think about entangled femininities where they cut across or they interlink? Because my experience, taking you a bit outside the mining operation, say where the workers live, is that people often talk of female mine workers as also miners. When we ask them, what do you mean mine workers? Besides mining in the mine, they also mine our pockets. Well, that's coming from a man. So can we not talk of Madoda Strait, who also happens to be Mafazi, who also happens to be a miner of the pockets? It's kind of an entangled. Well, this is coming from my own interviews.
Just 2 points. Firstly, for Asan. Basically, I just want to understand the recruitment process in the mining environment, and in particular in the platinum belt. Obviously, these will be the conclusions that you'll make based on your study. I'm currently reading a book by Thomas Piketty, 21st century. Capital in the 21st century, and he starts his preface by, documenting what transpired in Marikana massacre and the role of the state to be on the side of capital. But more importantly for me, since the demise of more than 44 people, obviously, we are still waiting for the outcomes of that commission. I don't want to deviate a lot, but I want just to talk about the role of women there. For those people who died, their wives have actually replaced them. So what is the nature of the recruitment process? Is it by ordination or by birth, or is it simply because no breadwinner exists in the family, then those women must take the place of their men in the mine? I just wanted to understand that. I think from Wiseni, I think basically I want to understand the rivalry between the student formation. Their rivalry, is it less about ideological issues, or is it less ideological, or is largely about performity or other aspects that you have actually alluded to? Because for me, the manner in which you were presenting, it appeared as less ideological, as you have spoken about the Freedom Charter and whether others are more Africanist. But it's up to you, therefore, to expand on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
you. My question is for you, Asanda. I always listen to your presentations, and your research is really interesting. But my question is very simple. Given the diverse characteristics that you have described under each group of women, how did you how did these women relate underground? What were your observations, given that the money makers didn't see themselves as mine workers, while the real Mafazis saw themselves as real mine workers? So how did they relate underground? What was your observation?
Thank you.
I forgot to say I had a dedication for my paper, my presentation today. And it's dedicated to the students in this university who have been disarmed of their president in the SRC there. Because if I was still a student and an activist had come to speak in any platform in this university, I would want them to say they are in solidarity with us. Adam Habib should not discipline people and disarm them of their president. I don't know if people are aware, but the SRC president was removed for some reason or the other. I believe it's because of the comments he made about Hitler, and I think it's an anti-intellectual position to have removed him. Anyway,
will see those things after. Yes, Lwazi, it is indeed a project about, because I think decolonization, the struggle for liberation was a critique on humanity. And the central thesis or the assumption of Western modernity about the humanity of black people. But in the process of that critique, I don't think there emerged, I think there are multiple interpretations. Some of those struggles are about inclusion into the conception of what humanity is in the West. And I think, but some of those struggles began to make critiques about a humanity outside of Western modernity, partly because I think they took the engagement with Western assumptions of our humanity much further. And that emerges, as you say, in the work of Maldonado Torres's idea of political love. And in my other chapter, where I'm dealing with criminals, I discuss this. No, in fact, in the chapter I'm dealing with underground units. Because this is one of the chapters in a series of chapters, as you know. The other chapter is about gangs, straight criminal violence, but that are political. People who were killing comrades, people who were harassing society, and so on and so forth. I studied the crossroads of crime and political violence in one chapter. In the other chapter, I try to understand the activists who engage in that form of violence, but who did not, as it were, sell out and use their violence against the very society that they claimed to be. And I argue that what held them back is political love. And in short, if in Hegel we find the dialectical relationship between master and slave to be the type of a self that possesses itself, like in that whole discussion, I don't have the quickest way to summarize it. I don't talk about it every day, so I don't have the words, but I'm going to try. What Torres says, Fanon's brilliance, the master doesn't respect in the colonial dialectical relationship. He laughs at the consciousness of the slave. They don't admire the slave. I don't think the slave has a consciousness. But the real word is consciousness of consciousness. Like they are not reflexive, they are not autonomous, they don't have the Cartesian sort of reflexivity. And what Fanon does then, through the cry in Black Skins, White Masks, Maldonado Torres says the critique that he does is that he advocates for a humanity which is not about selves that possesses themselves, but selves that think of their existence and their meaning to themselves as giving themselves. And that I think is critical, and to put that simply is like political love, not romance per se, but political love, because you think of yourself, the legitimacy of yourself, or you think of your humanity as an act of always giving yourself to the other. And hence the whole discussion about the gift. So that is, I deal with it elsewhere. Here, I really wanted to provide a rich, and I do, it's stories and stories and stories of how politics developed in this one school, in their nuance, in their complexity, because it's such an important school in Sasolburg, but also in the Vaal, where real people who troubled society, who made society, came out of. So, and I argue that their challenge of the school provided a critique of humanity. It was a critique of, and they did that. So I do life history interviews on one hand, and I look at the archives. The school has a logbook, has pictures and all those things, and I interview teachers and so on and so forth. So there are all these ideas that are collected from the life experiences of these people. Some of them had just recently come back into the country from MK and so on and so forth, and were integrated as students. So the ideas of the Freedom Charter, the ideas of liberation, were important. But this is after 84, after the Vaal uprising. The Vaal was no longer the same after 84. In fact, the whole country was no longer the same after 1984. We all know that. And so they used all those tools to constitute a critique and demand consent. And this is important. You are not going to teach us without our consent. And that is law. Law must never work like that. It must never be superimposed. So is education. The biggest pedagogical, liberatory pedagogy is the one that assumes that central thesis, consent. I discuss it much further. And then the last thing is that I want to say is no, the content, you see, these are lies. The contests start with an ideological debate between Azazim. Like any political society, there are contests. And here I'm trying to, so there's nothing really exceptional here. There are political contests even in this room. In any society so those were the political contests. Black consciousness people, at least in that school, never saw the importance of the Freedom Charter. But those ideas meant that you could either be voted into SRC or not, and so the contestation of influence, of numbers, and so on and so forth. So, but it became violent. Like many activities in the 80s, they became, even simple things, like very many things became violent. People resolved differences with knives in the township, you know that. It's part of how apartheid structured that society with violence. It turned violent, and but what is important here is that they are both debaters. It's not like they resolve differences when like they are not reasoning or the failure of reasoning. No, it's both. It's the beast is like that. It's I beat you up, but I can also debate with you. I'll beat you in a debate. I'll beat you outside. I'll come and beat everyone in your field. There's no one who can like that type of a situation. So it's to demonstrate those things that, you know, like the relationship between violence and reason there is not as traditional as we know it. Even reasonable people can be very violent. And yeah, we I don't think it's ideological. Yeah.
I'll start with you, Jane. Underground, how did the women relate? I think with My Daughter Straight, one of the things that I make very obvious is that they did not want to associate with femininity, and sometimes that meant not even associating with other women. But also underground is time is important. You have to get to the stove and you have to start working. After Shaila time comes, you have to rush for the cage. So if you're talking about underground as a space, there's very little relating or interaction between women underground, but it's on surface. But again, in one of my chapters, I talk about how actually in all these different spaces, women take up different identities. On surface, they don't see themselves as My Daughter Straight. They're preparing themselves for home. And so they start acting in a very different way, in ways that other women can relate to them and they can relate to other women. They take on very different identities. So on surface, they relate to other women. And then the role of women, how they're recruited, the recruitment process, just broadly, is that you have to be from Rustenburg, 60 kilometers from the mine. Now, about the Marikana case where mine workers have been replaced by their wives, that's the unfortunate thing, I think, across mining, where if you die, especially if you die at work, underground, because of an accident, a family member is supposed to replace you. That's how they help these families, by replacing them, by bringing in another person, basically, who might also die in mining. It's also happened before, where people die one after another, family members will replace each other. And then another one is the categories. I'm not saying that the categories are fixed per se. They are ideal categories. You can see the differences, underground especially. And My Daughter Straight cannot act like a Mafazi all of a sudden. That would confuse all the workers. Because this is not just her, but it's also how workers see her and treat her. They treat her in ways that are consistent with this identity. So it's not fixed, but you have to be consistent with it. And it's not, when I'm saying it's not fixed, is that when you go home, for instance, like this My Daughter Straight, she made it very clear that at home she's a woman. at home madoda straight and not madoda straight. So again, the spaces are important in these categories. The spaces influence how women enact femininities. Their performances are in a way influenced by these spaces, so you cannot take that away from it. But they're not necessarily fixed, like I'm saying. But also, I think one other thing that I probably didn't say is that this is there's no essence to some of these things. It's not like one way. There's no essence to how they enact it. It's a way in which they are produced underground. It's a process. It's a way of becoming. You become a madoda straight woman. You don't come underground already a madoda straight woman. So in the initial stages, especially, while you may not be like a mafazi, but you may keep sleeping between being a madoda straight and being a real mafazi. But you need to learn to be a madoda straight and consistently enact that after a while. And the questions by Lwazi about that some of these things have their roots back home. I think, yeah, and I talk about that in some of my chapters. One of my chapters is the chapter on home, for instance. It's a chapter that I talk about relations and about how some of these things, the reason they are able, especially men, to planisa underground is precisely because they've been planising all their lives outside of work. But I think for this chapter, because I'm focusing specifically underground, I have to show how they deploy planisa underground, but how women, who are not usually the ones who are doing the planising outside, at least not in the same way that they're doing underground, how they also learn to planisa from their friendships with men, from doing this work every day. So I'm not saying it's either or. I think in both spaces there's planisa. In fact, like you're saying, it's historical, and I do talk about that in one of my chapters.
So Carl, it's 1 o'clock. Do we take another round or do we start?
Sure, take another quick round.
Yeah, it's such a rich discussion. Okay, we'll take...
we have to demystify that planisa is a black thing. I think it's beyond race. The Afrikaners would tell you Apurmaka plan. You are right, we planisa every day, so it's not just an underground thing. But I want to build on the notion of power and premise it on what my feeling yesterday, that it looks like we come a long way, protracted struggle of liberation, but there comes a point where either theory or our spirit lapses. You know, and yesterday I felt like reading a book on the end of theory, because the first discussion was that SWAP experienced the same moment of lapse. After 94, they felt, are we consultants? Are we dating our hands? These are the people who have come a long way fighting for something. What is this thing that we are fighting for? Suddenly, we have captured state power and we feel like we've arrived, we slow down. So they're slowing down. And this has happened again where Michael took us through Wilpie and Bonjour, where even Wilpie at WWC felt like, I've arrived, what can I do next? What should we do? And felt completely in death somehow. And I'm seeing this in everything. This morning the councillors, I fight them, I remove them, I take the power through a hard-headed toy and killing, murdering people. Once I get in power, I buy the same nice clothes and nice cars and become the same as them. Where is the problem? Where are we? What kind of theoretical regime will live beyond these moments of lapse? Whether it's an individual, it's an institution, it's a society itself, and all these things. Now, where is the power? Where are people powerless? This morning, Malusi puts such a word that made me very, very uncomfortable, that people are powerless. Yes, they could be marginalized, but are they really powerless? Are the women in underground, whether they're planissing or not, are they feeling, is there a sense that they are powerless? Are people inherently powerless? Is power only seen in the eyes of the states, in the laws of the states? And this is where I want even the youth, how the youth organize in Brisbane. Is there a sense that whether the Bantu education was so powerfully imposed, superimposed on them, was there a sense of powerlessness in this all people? Is there a sense of powerlessness? And whether in Brazil or Spain, the protest movements, is there a sense that there's people, the their powers beyond protest.
That's it.
beyond
No lunch for you, Chief. No lunch for you. Yeah, so, but, yeah, you're gonna.
I'm sorry.
Tumi from UP, Sociology. My question is for Asanda. How did the men underground relate to you? And to push it further,